So I'm here by an old growth coastal Douglas fir, of which only about 1% remain. 99% have been logged. What I wanted to talk about today is an update on where BC old growth policies are at. So far, the progress has been that Premier Eby has committed to three critical things, and he should be thanked for that. It's essentially to double the protected area system in BC from 15% now to 30% by 2030. He's brought in over $1 billion in provincial federal funding to make it happen. And now discussions are underway with dozens of First Nations on establishing new Indigenous protected and conserved areas spanning millions of hectares of British Columbia, including in old growth forests. But there are three critical gaps that are still missing. First is there are no ecosystem-based targets. That is, science and traditional ecological knowledge targets for every ecosystem to ensure places with the big trees, for example, are protected and not just alpine areas or subalpine areas with no trees or low timber values. Secondly, there needs to be funding for First Nations to undertake logging deferrals in the most at-risk old growth in places where the First Nations have an old growth logging dependency. And thirdly, the government's got to close the gaps in the old growth management areas and wildlife habitat areas system where you can move around some of these places or log in them. These loopholes are so big, they're big enough for thousands of logging trucks to pass through. So Eby's got to close those critical gaps. It's vital right now that Premier Eby shows leadership and get this done. So I just wanted to give an update. That little video clip was filmed in May. In June, the BC government announced a whole series of significant new protected areas, including in old growth temperate rainforests. They announced 2,000 square kilometers west of Hudson's Hope in northern British Columbia will be protected in the Clinzy's Twin Sisters Provincial Park in West Moberly and Salto First Nations territory to protect mountain caribou and other northern wildlife. They announced 76,000 hectares in the greatest southern coastal temperate rainforest that exists on Earth today. The Clayoquot Sound area near Tofino on western Vancouver Island will be protected in new provincial conservancies as a result of the leadership of the Ahousaht and Clayoquot First Nations, with the support funding from the provincial and federal governments and from conservation groups. This is the greatest old growth protection victory in British Columbia in almost a decade, and it is one of the great old growth protection victories on Earth. And this is an area that I worked myself to help protect for several decades. It was a great day when this was announced just a few weeks ago. The BC government also announced the protection of 8 sites on generally the southern coast and also in the inland temperate rainforests through their Old Growth BC Nature Fund, a federal fund that needs to be matched provincially, and it's one of the funds that the Endangered Ecosystems Alliance was instrumental in securing from the federal and provincial governments. That fund was vital to help buy these private lands in some of the very rarest of old growth forest types, in the coastal dry forests, in some of the inland temperate rainforests, in places like Galliano, Pender, Esook, Saanich, the Puntledge River near Comox, the inland temperate rainforest near Crescent Spur in the Rocky Mountain Trench, along with the Nkamaplo protected area, which was announced in the West Kootenays several years ago under the BC NDP government as well, in the inland temperate rainforest. All these protected areas total about 3,500 square kilometers roughly of British Columbia, an area the size of Strathcona Provincial Park added with Manning Provincial Park. It's a big deal. It's an important step forward. We got to be careful because the BC Conservative opposition party, under John Rustad, says they're going to kill any protected areas expansion if they come to power. At the same time, the NDP have got to close the conservation loopholes that I expanded upon a bit earlier. So we're making progress. There's quite a lot more to do here.